Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to actually the first of the Leaders Advancing and Helping Communities Summer Porch Chats. In this series, we're going to be covering different topics with different experts on the field and topic of the day. So today's topic is all about gambling treatment and prevention. And all of our viewers, just so you know, all you need to do is relax and tune in. It's a beautiful day outside, so if you want to join us from outside or on your porch, please feel free to do so. And also, if you have any questions as we're having this conversation, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we will definitely answer those before the end of our discussion. So with that, I would like to introduce who's joining me today. So Miss Lori Mello. She is currently the program manager of the Health Management Systems of America's Gambling Treatment Program. She was formerly the manager of clinical best practice and at Training and Treatment Innovations Incorporated for 4.5 years. Prior to TTI, former positions included community education coordinator at Haven, which is an agency that deals with domestic violence and sexual assault, fundraising and campaign at United Way, associate director of Women's Survival Center in Pontiac, and extensive case management in Detroit and Oakland County at Caregivers. There she worked with and supervised teams that worked with at-risk families and youth, providing in-home counseling and support services. She also worked to find to find permanent housing for families in Detroit shelters, as well as with persons diagnosed as HIV positive or with AIDS. And Lori also holds an undergraduate degree in social work from San Diego State University, a graduate degree in counseling from Oakland University, and a graduate degree in public administration, also from Oakland University. In her spare time, she enjoys listening to audiobooks, exercising, theater, and rescuing animals, and she enjoys hanging out with her dog Barney and several cats. So Lori, as usual, thank you for being here and welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, absolutely. And yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. So we'll just go ahead and start. I think the first question here, this can kind of get the ball rolling a little bit. So, we hear these different terms around gambling, gambling addiction, problem gambling, gambling disorder. All three of these, it can be a little bit confusing to know what each of them mean, how they're different, how they're similar. So can you just go ahead and explain what each of these three terms mean?
Sure. Gambling disorder is actually the current diagnostic term, which we as counselors, social workers, we use that. That is in what we call the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. That in the DSM is the official diagnosis. That was changed in May of 2013 from pathological gambling. We also use problem gambling a lot, and we use it to describe people who are having a problem with gambling. They're not quite at the criteria for being diagnosed with gambling disorder. However, they're having problems already. They're losing money, they're losing time with family and friends, their children. They're not doing things they used to do. They're spending more time gambling, and they're starting to go down that hole, that spiral downward. So you can certainly use problem gambling. It's interchangeable with a lot of different things, and we still use that. You might hear gambling addiction from time to time, and gambling addiction really it describes it accurately as well. It's an addiction. It really is, and it's the hidden addiction as well.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think, that it just can be so confusing with as terms change, we tend to use some of the older terms, and it still can kind of mean the same thing, but I think that's a good place to start. So next, the second question I have is, if a person is gambling and they can afford to lose the money that they are gambling, can they still have a gambling disorder or still have gambling problems? Or kind of similarly, I guess, this is kind of a common thought we hear a lot of times, so isn't gambling disorder or problem gambling just a financial problem?
a lot of times people say that, you hear about these actors, people with a lot of money, they make a lot of money, and they say, well, they're always gambling, but they seem to be doing all right. They haven't lost their home. Well, it's certainly, I think when the average individual like, you and me, we gamble like that and we have financial issues, or we lose our home, God forbid, or something like that, it becomes very apparent very quickly. With people who have a lot of money, they have other problems and other issues. There's ways that you can tell someone is gambling to excess. And one of those ways is the loss of money. The other is loss of time. Loss of time with family and friends, loss of time with activities you used to enjoy. Maybe you went to a community activity, you're missing more and more of your child's birthday parties or activities with your child. Oh, I forgot this, I missed this, because you were like gambling online or at the casino. So it really does affect the quality of life overall. So it's not just money. A lot of times too, you'll hear this, they say, gambling is never about the money. It's about all these other things. So when they're playing, they actually don't think, oh gosh, I've lost this amount of money. It's about other things like their self-esteem, loneliness, grief, and so forth.
Thank you for that. I think that is a great point too, that like gambling is not just about the money, and it's never about the money. I think a lot of us just assume that it is about money because people gamble with money most of the time.
Of course.
Yeah, I think that's great to notice. So you had mentioned, kind of backtracking a little bit here, with the term gambling addiction, that is still sometimes used and sometimes heard. Can you talk about how gambling affects the brain? Like, how can it actually be addictive like a substance when there's no substance being introduced to the brain?
It's interesting. And I would say the past 10 to 15 years, they've been doing a lot of studies and doing brain scans. And they've actually taken people and they've been wired up, and they've shown the brain scans of people in the midst of gambling and betting, doing what it is that they do. And on the other side, they've shown a brain scan of someone who is high on cocaine or high on anything, any drug that they're taking. And you look at that and you say, wow, the similarities between the two scans is incredible. This is what we call a process addiction. So it's more about, it's not about the substance, it's about the behavior, and becoming more and more addicted through the behavior, and the ongoing feeling that you've got to go back and you feel compelled, which is of course closely tied to, as I said, self-esteem, loneliness, and grieving. Those are all feelings that people have, and the grief in particular. A lot of elderly people playing in that way, and knowing that they can go somewhere and they can kind of relieve that emotional pain. So elderly people also have told me that a lot of times if they have, for example, arthritis and they have aches in their joints, they will say, when I'm gambling, like when I'm at the slot machine, my pain goes away. They become very mesmerized. So there is something chemically that is going on in the brain, and they've started to prove that. When I say they, I mean some of the researchers who are doing this kind of work, and they're actually wiring people up to see what the brain looks like, and it does change. It's incredible.
Yeah, that's really fascinating that you can just kind of tell that how the brain actually looks and works there, that it is so similar. And again, I think that's a great point to mention, that also, people gamble as a coping mechanism with, like, for that grief or pain or things like that.
Yes.
And that's definitely a difficult thing and can start to cause those problems, I think. So
right.
Thank you for that. My next question is, this one might be kind of difficult to answer, I guess, but who is most likely to develop a gambling disorder or problem gambling?
I'm going to answer that. It's going to sound like an easy answer. I'm just going to come out and tell you, anyone. Anyone is vulnerable to this. A lot of it depends on where you are in your life. If you just had a loss, and let's say, as an example, let's say you just had a loss and you go with friends or someone to a casino, or you start playing a game online and it becomes addictive and it pulls you in. That's one way to become addicted to it. You could be any age. We have gamblers start 10 years old, playing dice on the street. Now, This is the new casino right here, right there. That's our casino right now. We have people online, stock traders. They become, they're day traders, and they become addicted to the rush or the thrill of how much money am I going to lose? And then they wait for it, the flip of a card, the flip of anything. So it's anybody at any time. It depends on circumstances in people's lives, I think, is really the direction that goes.
Thank you for that. That is a great point for awareness, just that, anybody can fall victim to this and deal with these problems. And that's something that we talk about a lot of times with substance use as well.
Sure.
It can obviously affect anybody. So this next question just kind of deals with that as well. So you had brought up your phone there. So can someone still experience problem gambling or gambling disorder even if they don't gamble at a casino?
Oh, yes. There are a lot of different ways to gamble. We know that, right? We have about 28 to 30 casinos, and it may be growing at this very moment right here in the state of Michigan. The majority of those casinos, those brick and mortar casinos, are Native American. They're Native run. We have only 3 right now, private casinos located in the city of Detroit. That is MGM, Greektown, which is now, I can't remember, it's not Greektown anymore, and Motor City. Those are the 3 that we have that are privately owned. We have lottery tickets, any kind of way that you can play the lottery. And some people say, how can you get hooked on that? If you've ever seen someone who goes into a store, they buy 20 lottery tickets, and they go out to their car or whatever, and they start scratching them off right in their car. I actually witnessed this several times with people. I tend to watch kind of closely because of what I do for a living, right? So they go out to their car, they scratch them all off, they see if they have any winners, then they go directly back into the store, and they may buy 20 or 30 more or 100 more, and then they're scratching all those off. Or they may stand in the party store and just scratch them all off. That's someone who just can't let go of that. They've got to know if they're a winner. They've got to know right now. And there's some rush and some thrill sometimes about just scratching off the little things that, on the lottery ticket. Playing the numbers as well. Got to play my numbers, and I got to play them every Tuesday and Thursday, for example. There's all sorts of ways you can get addicted. So it's certainly not just a casino. And of course, we know about the online games. Online gambling became legal in the state of Michigan in January 2021. This was during the pandemic, which we know it ebbs and flows with COVID, but it's still kind of going on. However, at the height of this, when it became legal, people were home. At the height of the pandemic, when people were locked down and they could not go to the casinos, they were playing some online games. Once it became legal, there was no holds barred. They were like, oh, great, I got my account, and I'm going to go to FanDuel or DraftKings or whatever, or some other place, and I'm going to play. It does for them. They feel like it's filling up an empty place inside of them too, very often. So yes, there's a ton of ways to gamble. And it's not just like, don't have to be just in Las Vegas to do that. It's anywhere. Keno, pull tabs in bars, all different types of games. Bingo is really, it's gambling. I mean, it fits the definition of gambling, risking something, money or something of value. And with bingo, a lot of it too is you're risking, you pay to play, and then you're also risking a lot of things, and you are committing your time as well. Now, some of that time may be fun, but it's also, you're paying to play, and you're winning or losing money as it goes, and I know several of my own relatives from years ago, aunts in particular, who go to the church and play bingo, and that was their entertainment, that was their time out. But then they started to have to go back. They had to go. So yeah, there's a ton of ways to gamble.
Thank you for that. Yeah, there's a lot there. So I didn't actually realize there were that many casinos in Michigan, but I think that's obviously a great point, that casinos are big, but also all these other ones. So lottery tickets, bingo, they can seem so innocent, but definitely there are people who have been affected by those things. I've seen like lottery tickets or scratch off tickets right outside, like on the ground, they've been scratched off. So obviously the person didn't win or something, but right outside of gas stations or 7-Eleven or whatever. So I think that definitely points to what you were talking about there. So
yes. Yeah, and those solitary ways to gamble increased during COVID lockdown in particular. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. So this next one is kind of getting into the mindset of someone who does gamble. So what are some of the common misconceptions or false beliefs that many people who do gamble have?
People, they have a lot of superstitions. A lot of people who are gambling, they feel like if they've been, for example, let's say they go to a brick and mortar casino, they sit at that slot machine and they feel that they can't leave that slot machine because if they do, it's gonna pay out because I've been sitting here for 3 hours. It owes me. And they don't understand the issue, or maybe they don't believe it about random number generators. So it's randomly generating these numbers. It doesn't save up a bunch. It doesn't have any identification of you. You're not important. That's just to the machine. That's just a machine. So the machine's going to pay out or not pay out. And what happens, I think, to enforce that myth, that understanding, is you'll be sitting at a slot machine for 3 hours, and then you're like, to heck with it. I'm not getting anywhere with this. I got to run to the restroom anyway. I come along and you notice that I'm sitting at your machine and then I win a jackpot. You say, you see, it was saving it all up for me and I made the mistake of walking away. It's just, it's so random. The other thing is a lot of times people will say, there's a skill to this game. Now, I'm going to say with poker, some of these other games like where you have to bet on players and stuff in sports, there's certainly some skill that goes on. There is. I'm going to say, blackjack, you have to know how to play the game. You have to keep a poker face. There's certain things that you have to be able to do. However, there's so much of that there is a randomness to it. It's a real randomness. Most of those games, there's a randomness to it. So they have a lot of superstitions. Maybe if they go to one casino as opposed to another, they're going to win more. If they are, if they play on this particular day or time, they're going to win money. Some people have the understanding that if they play the machine that's closest to the entrance of the casino, where people can really see that it's going to pay out more. And maybe initially, there may be times when it sets up like that. Just know the house always has the advantage. They don't set up casinos for you to win. They just don't. That's the hard part too. Other things too, I can make this up. That's what we call chasing your losses. I'm going to win eventually. I'm going to go back. I'm going to win it all. It just depends. I have to stick with it, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, definitely a lot there too. So I think the big one that I always try to talk about is that random number generator. So, it is easy, I think, to fall into that trap of, I have been here, I put the time in, this win kind of is mine, or I earned this win, but that's just not how it works. It is just completely random there. So,
right.
Yeah, definitely.
Even with lottery as well, we had people sometimes who will call us and say, my grandma, for example, she plays X number of tickets or whatever per month, and they always say there's at least one winner or something like that. Don't you think she's entitled to a win or due for a win? It's like, yeah, they say that there's one winner every so often or whatever. $2 is a winner. Right. $10 is a winner. So they're not talking about, thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So this next question, this is just a hypothetical here. So I think many people have experienced this or they might experience this, but for example, like my friend or family member is a frequent gambler and has repeatedly asked me for money. Should I help them so that they don't turn to some other potentially illegal activity, or is that just going to contribute to the problem?
Yeah, it's a hard situation because if you give them money, you're giving them money to gamble, no matter what they say, pretty much. They're going to say, I need money for my rent. Well, you could pay the rent. If you are in a position where pay the rent. If they say, I don't have any groceries, go out with them and buy them groceries at Kroger or whatever. Don't give them cash money. It's kind of like anyone who has substance use disorder or any issues with substances. If you give someone cash money, they're going to go and they're likely not going to buy groceries. They're going to take that and buy a fifth or whatever they're going to do. It's the same with gambling. Don't give them cash money. I would also encourage them in a loving, caring way to say, I'm very concerned about, you're gambling a lot, and some will listen to that and some won't. A lot of it depends on the relationship you have with them. I'm very concerned about you. Give them our helpline number to call. I don't think I have a gambling problem. Why don't you call these folks? Have a talk with them. We just want to talk to them, just to have a discussion. And we can do a survey, see where they land on that survey too. And see if they tell you you have a gambling problem or not. There's all sorts of ways to approach that. However, just giving them cash money is not going to solve the problem. And if you want to help them specifically with paying a bill, not cash money.
Thank you. I think that's a great practical answer and definitely could help someone who is, dealing with that or going through that. So great point there. And then my next question is, are there medications that someone can take to decrease their gambling?
Well, at this particular point in time, we have sometimes people will be on anti-anxiety medications to reduce their anxiety, their depression, which has come from perhaps trauma that they've experienced or something else, which might help with that. However, right at this moment, there's no specific medication that works with gambling disorder. However, there are some medications that may exacerbate it, make the problem worse. So one of the first things that our counselors, our people ask is, are you taking any medications? What are you taking? And if someone is on mental health medication for a challenge, it may be that they need to switch their medication because it could be making the problem worse. So that's something just to know. There's all sorts of ways in which we work with people with gambling disorder. One of them is trying to help them to understand why they started gambling in the first place. How did that start? Then trying to help them to find an activity to replace the gambling. That's the hard part. Gambling can be so thrilling, or it can be so comforting to the person who is very lonely and very grief-stricken or has dealt with a trauma. That part of the issue with all of that is helping them to find a different way to go. The gambling is not necessarily going to help them with any of those issues, and in fact will make things worse. So
yeah, that's really great to know that there are medications that are potentially making it harder for the person. So
yes,
definitely something to be aware of there. And this next question again kind of builds off of that, and you touched on this a little bit, but if someone does need help for gambling treatment, what treatment options do exist?
There's a number of things that we do right here in the state of Michigan. I think we're very progressive in that way, and we're adding to this program all the time. There is the Michigan Gambling Disorder Helpline and Treatment Program. You want to give them the phone number. That's 1-800-271-7117. Excuse me. What's going to happen when they call? They will get someone on the helpline who will talk to them. They will have that discussion with them. They can also refer them to a counselor who, in their area, most of the counseling, especially since COVID, has been virtual. Nothing wrong with that. We can get somebody in a lot quicker that way to receive counseling, and it's just a lot better for them virtually. However, we do have a handful of people right now because COVID, is still kind of raging. We have people who will see someone face to face. We can also do telephone counseling. We also see families of people who are gambling, because sometimes people, they really need the information. They need the education. They need the awareness. And they need to understand. So we have the individual counselors that they can see in a variety of ways. We are opening up a residential, and I think we have more than one now, and that's going through a pilot program right now, residential treatment for just gambling disorder. There's a lot of things to work out with that. We're still working that out. So that number, once again, because I flubbed it the first time, sorry everyone, is 1-800, you think I'd know this, 270-7117. 1-800-270-7117. Please, if anyone has any questions about gambling, they're not sure if they have a gambling problem or not, they want help, they want advice, suggestions, they just want to talk, please give them that number. There's somebody available 24/7, not a recording, a real person who's on the phone ready to answer their call. The other option too, there are Gamblers Anonymous meetings. They're starting to come back together face-to-face, which is great. They do have some that are virtual. They have a wide variety. There are a few Gam-Anon meetings for members of the family, friends, people who just want to know more about gambling disorder. They can attend that. If they go to gamblersanonymous.org, they will see all the meetings listed. However, one of the recommendations I have is that if you see that on the website, make sure that if it says it's at this particular church, call the church. Call the church first to make sure it's still on at that church, because you never know. They may have just canceled the meeting for that evening, or they may have just decided they were going to cancel it permanently. You want to do that as well. So there's some of those options available for people. There's all kinds of recovery groups and things, but these deal specifically with gamblers and to help.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. There's so many resources out there, and we just got to get the word out so that people who do need that help can get that help. So just to reiterate a little bit, so there are options for families and friends. They can get the help as well, because we know that not or more than just the person who's gambling is affected by this.
Yes.
And then I think that's also very interesting about the residential treatment as well. So
yeah, we're excited about that.
Awesome. And I think that is all the questions that I had. I'm just checking the chat here on Facebook Live. I'm not seeing any other questions here. So I'll just go ahead and turn it back to you. Do you have any final thoughts for us today?
Yes, I'd like to just say to everyone out there, anyone listening, if you have a gambling problem, you think you do, you're not sure if you do, you have a family member, a friend, anyone who is interested in finding out, getting more information, please don't hesitate to call our helpline, 1-800-270-7117. We're ready and available and to take your call, and we want to help you. We want to help your loved ones. This service too, it costs nothing to call. It's certainly confidential. And we want you to get the information that you need. If you're not quite sure, we can send out pamphlets to you, brochures, things to help you to understand a little bit more. We're there for education and awareness as well. We do presentations throughout. If anyone has a church group, any significant group they belong to, they want more information, we will go to your church or your group or whatever and speak. We will do it virtually. We want to get the word out as much as possible. So don't hesitate to give us a call. Please, there's hope out there. There's hope and there's help.
Thank you so much, Lori. I think, again, you had some great points, and I just want to thank you again for being here and spending the time with us today. So I think you always explain things in a simple and effective way, and I think all of our viewers can probably appreciate that as well. So thank you one more time, and thank you as well to our viewers. Please feel free to make sure that you follow us on social media so that you can stay up to date with any of our other programs and events coming up. And with that, we'll go ahead and end. Have a great rest of your night.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.